Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where these days there's so much movie news, stories even break on Saturday. Of course, I'm talking about Kevin Feige's confirmation heard around the world, and that's that his and Sony's Spider-Man will indeed be Peter Parker, and he will be firmly entrenched in high school, age 15 to 16. Now this was quite the headline, and I think we can approach this story from two separate angles. Now one, there's the age. Kevin Feige, and this is the less controversial angle, so that's where we're starting with it first. Now Kevin Feige elaborated and he said, well, the reason I want to have Peter Parker in high school and not just graduating high school as he did in the first two versions of this character on the big screen is because Feige argues there are lots of really fantastic Peter Parker stories that take place in high school, and that was a missed opportunity to develop the character and to explore those stories. Now, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a wonderful run, obviously, in the Ultimate Universe with Peter Parker, thanks to Brian Michael Bendis, but I don't think that anybody, particularly readers today, are like, man, I sure miss Peter Parker in high school. Those were the days, huh? I mean, after we've gone through the Clone Saga, the Grim Hunt, the whole Superior Spider-Man thing with Otto Octavius taking over Peter Parker's body and becoming the Superior Spider-Man, and now, of course, he's come so far with Parker Industries. I mean, I think that's a big aspect to it, actually, that in the comics, they've made such a big deal. Dan Slott, who's been writing the Spider-Man comics for years now, has really gone out of his way to try and, break the status quo, like the hamster wheel. Like, let's tell some different Peter Parker stories. Let's have some things finally work out for him. And I think it's been incredibly successful. First with Superior Spider-Man, and then now with Parker Industries, something that Otto Octavius actually got the ball rolling on when he was Peter Parker, but that Peter Parker now in control of himself again. Comic book stories, you gotta love them. Now he's still running with it and, trying to work on supervillain rehabilitation centers, aka, prisons. They're supposed to be rehabilitation centers, that's the idea. But anyway, we've come so far to be told we're going right back to the beginning again, I think is a little frustrating as a Spider-Man fan. We'll also see how moviegoers feel about this. I mean, that'll be the third version of Peter Parker, and they'll also be going back to square one. And I just think that's hard to ask an audience to do. And does that mean another origin story? I just think that's very, very difficult. And then also by having such a young character in the MCU, Kevin Feige says, oh, well, this will be a really fresh change of pace. It'll differentiate him from our other characters. Well, I worry, considering the lighter tone in the Avengers, all the Marvel films, I worry that it could end up seeming a little bit like a Disney Channel movie, especially because, this is a Disney brand now. So I think there's that concern. Now, of course, the standalone Spider-Man movie will be made by Sony, but you don't want it to seem like a Nickelodeon movie either. I mean, Sony doesn't have a kids brand, but I think you know what I'm saying. There's a distinct feel to these child-centric properties. And so if you have a character of that age, I think that you run into the problem of, alienating your older audience. And the younger audience might also be bored of this because they're like, I've already watched the cartoon, I've seen the other movies, etc., etc. And also, I'm into the adult heroes. I've never really understood the logic that kids like to see themselves up on the big screen. I know some of you might argue, well, why do you say it works for women? Well, I think everybody likes to imagine the idealized version of themselves on the big screen, and the same goes for kids. They like to think that, well, when I get older, I will turn into Tony Stark, Batman, Black Widow, Luke Skywalker, Harry Potter. That's why these things always happen around puberty. That's the whole, hero's journey idea, Joseph Campbell, that Lucas first grasped upon with his Star Wars saga. And that's why it works so well with kids. It's so effective. So I guess if they can cast a 15 or 16-year-old who looks older, maybe it'll work. But I just feel that going back to a childlike character is just really iffy in terms of the light tone and also keeping adult audiences interested. And then furthermore, this is supposed to be a Civil War big character. That's the whole reason Feige wanted him. But I think there's a really different conversation that's going to take place with making a child expose their secret identity, which of course is what is what a major turning point in the Civil War story, right? It becomes a little bit sleazier if Tony Stark's like, hey kid, take off your mask for the camera. And you're like, whoa, slow down. I mean, as I said before, I think that I could add an interesting layer to if it handled appropriately, but it requires such a deft touch that I just, I think it's real, why go through the minefield if you don't have to? All right, so there's the age angle. Now let's go to the other one, which is the controversial one, and that of course is that it's Peter Parker and not Miles Morales. And I have to say, just off the bat, we're going to talk about another really controversial subject as well in the viewer question today, which is actually my question to you. But I think that the hate for Miles Morales is really stunning. I'm just really surprised. I hope it is just a very vocal, small contingent. But the hate for this character, who, by the way, is extremely well realized on the page. Brian Michael Bendis did a fantastic job here. The hate for this character, which many people I see in the comments admit they have never even read his comic, is just mind-blowing. And I would expect, a lot of people are, like, that's not my Spider-Man, etc., etc. But I think you should really, these people who are so against Miles Morales should take to heart that we're not saying let's change the ethnicity of Peter Parker. This is a different character who happens to wear the webs. And I think that that was a really smart move on Marvel's part. They didn't change the ethnicity of Peter Parker. They created a new character. And that's why Miles Morales is so strong and stands on his own. And it's a fresh character. And this is a character who's another child. So you get that, high school sensibility that Kevin Feige wants. And as I said before, him going to a charter school, I think it reflects on the experience that a lot of kids are having today. Whereas I think Peter Parker's, high school experiences are very much rooted in the era in which he was created. Not a lot of relatability going on there. And we've already had so many stories about unpopular kids in school, the science nerd. It's been done so many times that Miles Morales, I think, was a really wonderful opportunity to be more unique and to add more diversity to a genre, the superhero genre, which desperately needs it. So I'm disappointed in this choice. I think it was a mistake. I can't say that too strongly, though, because I think that so far Marvel has really done a good job with pretty much everything they've done. They've had a few missteps, but they've always recovered. This is such a big one, though, that I also don't know if Peter Parker maybe could be saved right now. Maybe this is something that needs needed more of a break, because I think that while I'm curious, if you're not in favor of Miles Morales, do you really want to go to, like, high school Peter Parker again? Do you really want to see Uncle Ben die and perish? Do you want to see him dealing with Aunt May and, oh, I'm in high school and I have to, hide my stuff in my backpack? Do you really want to do that for a third time? I just think it's, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I think there's such hate toward Miles Morales. I don't know if Marvel could go with him, even though I think that is the smarter decision. Well, just on paper, because again, it's not a smart decision when you consider some of the angry fervor against such a change. And it is sad. It's very sad. It's sad to see everyone making fun of Black Widow, and it's sad to see everybody upset about Miles Morales. That in a space that's so large, so many people are not invited to play. It's just really surprising. And every time anyone tells me in the comments, oh, there's no sexism, there's no racism, well, just think about these situations, and that there can't be a Miles Morales because some people are just so upset with the idea. It literally makes them foaming at the mouth. And people are so upset that Black Widow might be an important member of the team, they just go off on crazy rants. I mean, it's just really, really shocking. And again, we're going to have another interesting discussion in the viewer question, so stay tuned. Let's take a little bit of a breather, let's step back, and talk about some non-controversial movie news. Alright, so the second story of the day is that James Wan, sure enough, we all predicted he was going to get offered a comic book movie. Furious 7 is doing so incredibly well. It's racing towards $1 billion. It could pass it, like in 3 weeks, it's looking like at this point, because it's already up to about $800 million worldwide, as we'll discuss on Movie Math later today. So, of course, we felt that Warner Brothers would swoop in and get him, especially because they have such a strong relationship with James Wan off of the Conjuring films. And he's, in fact, getting ready to direct the Conjuring 2 for them right now. So they're like, Aquaman, James Wan, we want to make it happen. And I think this is a very interesting development. Now, from the industry standpoint, there's a little bit of a problem with James Wan's schedule. Not only is he getting ready to do the Conjuring 2, so that's going to take up a considerable amount of his time. He's just beginning his prep on that. But also, he apparently has an option with Universal, or they have an option on him to direct Fast and Furious 8. So they could exercise that option. It's built into his contract. They have every right to say, Fast and Furious 8, we want you. And so that would make it almost impossible to have Aquaman ready in time for its set release date. So that's a big problem they're grappling with. Now, of course, Warner Brothers could delay Conjuring 2 again, but I would say of the two properties, the Conjuring 2, considering it will be a much cheaper film to make, is actually a stronger commodity, because we know it's going to make a lot of money at the box office. The first one was so good that I think that I would not delay that much longer. They've already delayed it to make sure he could direct anyway. I wouldn't swap out, because I think Aquaman is still a very iffy property. And then that's the other part of the discussion. I love James Wan. I know a lot of you have a lot of faith in Christopher Nolan. A lot of you have faith in Marvel. I have that kind of faith in James Wan. I haven't seen the man fail yet. But I have to say, it'll surely be tested with him directing an Aquaman movie. Now, I think that he brings so much credibility as a director at this point. He's becoming a brand himself. Speaking of someone like Christopher Nolan, I think a lot of people have trust in James Wan. That putting him on a film that stars Jason Momoa would go a long ways to convincing people that, there's more good than bad here. Part of the good also being the new look for Aquaman, which, as you might recall, I really, really think is strong, and I think it's very good. But also, if they don't get a good enough director, at the end of the day, it's another Jason Momoa movie, and those have never done well. So I think that James Wan brings a lot of prestige to the film, and I can certainly see how Aquaman benefits from James Wan. But I don't yet quite see how James Wan benefits from Aquaman. I think there's so much baggage with this character, and James Wan is at such a crucial point in his career. I honestly, if I were him, I think he has the power to say to Warner Brothers, what else you got? Because I'm not directing that. I think they'd be happy to give him any one of their things. And what about Green Lantern? I think it would be interesting to see him on that. I'd even prefer he direct Wonder Woman if they hadn't already put somebody on that film. Or maybe a Justice League 2, or just the Justice League movie that they're hopefully prepping. I think to some degree Batman v Superman is kind of a Justice League movie. But they have so many movies that they're planning. Shazam, I'd rather see him on Shazam. I just think there are a lot of other better properties, and Aquaman, I think, is very troubled. So again, I don't see the benefit to James Wan. I'd rather he make Fast and Furious 8, quite frankly, and it will probably be ready to go into production after he finishes with The Conjuring 2. But I'm curious to what you guys think. Do you think this is a good move? Do you think he's a good match with the Aquaman character? And do you think this is a good move for James Wan? If you were advising James Wan with his career, what would you tell him to do? If he came to you and he said, it's a comic book movie, it's Warner Brothers, they have a great relationship with the studio, Jason Momoa does look badass in this photo they released of him, but should I do it? Should I make the Aquaman movie? What would you say? What would you say to him? What advice would you give? All right, so the third story of the day, talking about careers evolving and wanting to make sure you stay at the front of the pack, Ian McKellen has signed on to play Cogsworth in the upcoming live-action adaptation of Beauty and the Beast from Disney. Amazing cast. It just got more amazing. And I think it's interesting that Ian McKellen continues to be a very savvy actor. He's always made sure he's been part of a big brand. He had Lord of the Rings with Gandalf, then of course he was Magneto in the X-Men films, and as both of those opportunities come to a close, he's pretty much done with Lord of the Rings, I would imagine, at this point, and X-Men, he's rumored to be in X-Men Apocalypse, but still, he's in the background of those films. He really kind of does cameos at this point. So I think it's very savvy of him to say, I need another big movie, and to go to Disney live-action fairy tales, which are really, hot and popping right now. Well, I was going to say firing on all cylinders, but I don't know. I think they're greenlighting too many live-action fairy tales, and I worry about them oversaturating the market, just as I'm beginning to become a little concerned as I watch Daredevil about the superhero market being oversaturated. I mean, it's just a lot, and I think it's crowded. And, you want the other types of movies, not only because, you want a diverse amount of entertainment available to you, but it's a palate cleanser. If you just watch too much of the same thing, eventually you're like, enough, I can't take it anymore. So I think I worry about Disney live action, and I worry about superheroes. But Ian McKellen, he doesn't have time to worry. He just wants to jump on one of these things to make sure he stays in the spotlight, and continues to get the amazing press that he gets out of being part of these franchises, which again I think is a very savvy career move. So Cogsworth, though, very, very interesting. David Ogden Stiers did the voice for the original. Very different type of personality than Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen, I don't know how he's going to handle the comedic aspects of the role. And as they sign on more and more actors to play these inanimate objects brought to life, for instance, Emma Thompson as Mrs. Potts, it's making me wonder how these characters will be realized as a clock and as a teapot. They had faces on them in the animated film, of course, but will they have faces that resemble the actors, or will they just kind of make faces out of different aspects of the inanimate object? I'm very curious to see how it works out, and they're also picking actors with such distinctive voices. I think it'll be hard for us to separate the character from the personality of the actor. We'll see. But I think by far and away, I think the real character, the really, really interesting casting still to come is Lumiere. Who's going to play that? He has, of course, the big musical number Be Our Guest, which is going to be in this movie, and they have to get someone really good to play that role. Very interesting indeed. I saw someone online recommend Jean Dujardin. That's certainly an interesting choice. I would maybe think Hugh Jackman, get him back to Beauty and the Beast, since, of course, one of the first things he ever did was play Gaston on the Australian stage. but they need a song and dance man, and they need someone who's going to really get the most out of that musical number. And I think Hugh Jackman potentially could, or maybe Neil Patrick Harris. I think one of those guys, a real showman that people would go just to see that number. But I'm curious, what do you think of Ian McKellen signing on to this? What do you think of the inanimate objects? How would you want to see Disney handle them? And also, I'm still wondering, is this just a straight adaptation like Cinderella? I'm not a particular fan of that, but considering how well Cinderella did, I would make it too if I were Disney. All right, so that's the third story of the day. Now, for the viewer question, I said today I actually had a question for you, and it's about the latest Jurassic World clip that features Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt. And you might have seen the news story develop over the weekend. It became so prominent that even The Hollywood Reporter has it on its front page on the website, and that's that Joss Whedon called the latest clip sexist, 1970s era sexist. And it's embarrassing for everybody all around. It's a real problem. And I almost wish it had never happened, because I'm very excited for Jurassic World. But it's just, I think, been a big headache for everyone involved, including Joss Whedon. So if you haven't seen this clip, I put a link below in the video description, so go check it out, then come back and we can discuss it, okay? All right, get ready. I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say when you come back to this video. All right, so what's the big brouhaha? Well, what happened is the Mary Sue tweeted out this clip, and they said, oh, we're too busy fanning ourselves over Chris Pratt to discuss this. Which I have to say, it's kind of embarrassing for the Mary Sue, right? The Mary Sue is a female, it's like the Jezebel of comic book websites. It really works hard. It's with a little less anger, though. Jezebel, I think, has a little bit of an angry tone to it. Mary Sue tries to be generally positive, but they really try and support women working in comics and positive portrayal of women in comics and, genre entertainment. So anyway, to write that as what they would say about the clip, I think makes them look pretty bad right off the bat, considering the purpose of the entire site. Well, I think Joss Whedon must have agreed to me, because it drove him to tweet them back and to reply. And he said, really? I'm still trying to get over the 1970s sexist aspects of the clip. Really? And I think he wrote something like, she's stiff, he's a life force, I can't believe this is still happening. Now, of course, Joss Whedon has talked at length about how, much he admired his mother, a very strong-willed woman who worked very hard during her life. And, that's really, flavored his view of women and really given him a strong sense of trying to portray women in that manner in popular culture, which is fantastic. And I think we can all agree what he did with Black Widow is amazing. But I think he really opened up a can of worms here, or a Pandora's box, that he probably didn't want to open up. And I would probably wager that he just had such a negative reaction to the Mary Sue presenting the clip in that manner, when I think he probably felt if anyone should bring up the sexist aspects of this clip, it's you, that he just had to speak out. And I think he's brought some unwanted anger towards him from fans, particularly right about when the time the Avengers is supposed to open. And I saw a lot of people saying mean things about the Avengers to, kind of like needle him. And I was like, oh, that happens to everybody on the internet. It was a little bit nice to see. Sorry, Joss. Misery loves company. But really juvenile comebacks from people to critique the Avengers. What are you critiquing the Avengers? What are you, crazy? If you want to say you think Joss Whedon should mind his own business, or you don't agree with him, that's fine. But to then go pick on the Avengers, it's like, come on, right? Come on. Or actually try defending the clip. I always amazes me when people will personally attack something or somebody, or attack something else associated with that person, instead of just actually addressing the matter at hand. It's like, what, you got nothing? But anyway, back to this clip. Where do I stand? Is it sexist? I think this is really, the interesting thing about this clip is that it's the current problem with men and women in a nutshell, right? It's all boiled down to one clip, and I think that's really unfortunate for Jurassic World. And I can see where guys are coming from. One of the biggest things that stands out to me from the clip is that Chris Pratt is just basically playing Star-Lord again. And I'm like, really? That's so weird. Like, this character is almost exactly like Star-Lord, and especially the way he interacts with women. So there are a couple of things there. So I can see, the male character I understand. And to his credit, they never should have dated. Intercompany, dating within the company is frowned upon for exactly this reason. Sexual elements shouldn't be in a business conversation whatsoever, right? And I have to say, he's the offending party here. He shouldn't have brought it into the conversation. When he made the joke about the bungalow, he started it down that path. And, while their date didn't work out, and it might totally be her fault, she doesn't sound like a particularly fun date, I think that, you have to maintain a professional demeanor, right? And so I think that this is, I think that I would urge everybody watching this clip to think of it from the other side. Right? So when you think about it from the guy's side, and I'm going to obviously try my best here, and I would be really interested for guys, male viewers, to put down, let us women know what you're thinking about this clip from your perspective. But here's a guy who obviously still feels kind of bad that their date didn't work out, and I think that he's just he's being who he is, right? For some reason they've allowed him to live on a bungalow on the side of the property. I'd be like, why don't you live in staff headquarters? There's already so much gone wrong here from a professional perspective that it's just waiting to explode. It's like, not only do you have bad dinosaur, practices, but your human resources practices also are severely lacking here at Jurassic World. He's just, that's the kind of guy he is. And I'm sure we've all met guys like this. And if you're a guy like this, you know who you are. He can't help himself. It's just the way he acts, all right? So I can understand people being like, don't be so hard on him, right? He's a swaggery kind of guy. Now, the reason I think women would get upset with this clip and be like, I'm trying not to be that woman, because, nobody wants to be this character that's portrayed in this clip. And I think that this kind of character is often used as a weapon against women. Like if a woman's like, oh, don't bring sex into our business conversation. I think one of the knee-jerk reactions of attack is, you're a prude, you're no fun. And women are like, oh boy, I do not want to be seen that way. But you shouldn't be talking about sex in our business conversation. I mean, that's the difficult situation that I think women often find ourselves in these days, where we don't want to be a prude, but you're totally crossing the line in terms of what's appropriate business conversation. For instance, anyone making a sexual gesture in a business conversation is totally out of line, and he could totally be written up for that. I mean, just think about it. I don't think everyone's like, oh, well, they're a romantic couple, they're flirting. But imagine if you actually did not like this person at all. You had no interest in them whatsoever, but you had to work with them, right? I think what really muddies this is that they did go on a date, so there was an attraction at some point. So I think that's what makes this a little bit more gray than it should be. But the thing is that if someone were meeting with you, whatever your place of work is, whatever you do for a living, if someone of the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever, came up to you and made, sexual gestures in your face in a aggressive manner and while making fun of you, I don't think you'd be that happy. Some of you I'm sure will be like, oh, it's just teasing at the office. That's fine. But you're assuming you have a good relationship with the person that's doing it. Imagine it's that guy or girl at the office you don't like, that you don't get along with. And just think of the really delicate and difficult situation you finally find yourself in. And I think this happens to women much more than it does to men. And I think that men are very good at, making it seem like the woman's a prude or difficult or annoying. And I can tell you, as a woman who sometimes has that said to them, and I'm sure any woman will agree with me in the comments, that's super annoying and frustrating. So when I watch this clip, I have to say I think Bryce Dallas Howard is doing a very poor job handling this situation, but I also commiserate with her, sympathize with her, in the situation she finds herself in. When she's trying very hard, all the negative comments, she said the thing about the board shorts, which she should have restrained herself, but most of the negative comments are coming from him. That comment about you can at least relate to one of those. I mean, that was an unnecessary shot and, just really something that shouldn't be brought into the workplace. But again, don't fish off, I've read this analogy, someone said this is a metaphor, Entertainment Weekly used it when talking about Black Widow and the Hulk, and I was like, what an antiquated old thing, but fishing off the company pier. Don't do it, there's a reason. Alright, so I'm very curious to discuss this with you today. That was my question to you. I'm excited to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 news stories, my question to you, and of course, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have for me. Thanks for watching. Bye.